This summer, I spent a week dowsing the Templar. Here's what happened.
So I'm beginning my week-long vacation and exploration of the Templar line, moving out to the east and border of the Czech Republic, here in a town called Friestark. You've probably heard me mention it before. And I stopped in the village square. It's my first stop of the vacation, Sunday afternoon, and immediately found a pair of lines running through the centre of the town. Now, I'm standing now in the male line. And as you will see in a second, it goes through the cemetery and probably on to the church. And the female line is a little further down the hill, and it seems to go through a school. So entirely consistent with what we usually find.
So this line was one of 2 or 3 lines that I was mapping, went through the cemetery and through the church, which we'll visit in a moment. And the female pair passed through this school and this weird statue of some female figure, perhaps even a goddess. There was no information available, unfortunately.
Just found out a little bit more information. Where the two lines run through the city centre was once a castle. The road is called Náhradě on Castle, and there's a sign which I'll video in a minute showing what that castle looked like before it was demolished.
So here is the castle. Looked like it was quite a sizable place, as you would imagine. I then explored the area around the church. It was very watery where the female line passed and the church was on the male line. These two lines were, this alignment, the two lines were very, very close together. It was a very hot day, so there was a small child splashing around in this pool initially. Or must have some kind of religious significance, or maybe it's just there to splash around in. I don't know. Anyway, the church, St. Nicholas Church, lies on the mill line. It was originally built in the 14th, 13th century. This is a modern church. And it was built on a pagan cemetery. So we can tell that once again the Catholics took a pagan site and built a church on it. Typical. I couldn't get in, but I did manage to peek through the iron railings. As I say, this is a fairly modern 18th century building that's situated on a more older site, as this heavily graffitied information board tells us. 19th century church, originally 1480. This wonderful old tree was also on the site. Walking around the town, doing my dowsing, some beautiful houses, huge, huge houses. Pretty little town.
Also on the line, this cross mill line.
Well, I hadn't found any sign of the Templar line, although I'd mapped 3 alignments passing through Friestark, and I decided to move on towards Lukov, where Everett and I had gone to the castle and found a mill line passing through it, and I walked down this valley to the side of the castle and discovered my first taste of the Templar line. The female Merkosh line was here, and what a welcome I was given by her. Look at all these Czech cartoon characters that somebody's taken the time to build on the Merkosh line, would you believe? I was fascinated by the fact that someone would do this, but the whole area on the Merkosh line had been developed around the theme of water. So these little cottages had little jetties and places to access the water, which is of course a female polarity thing. And maybe shades of something yet to come, a strange little tower of stones sitting in the stream. And you'll see what I mean later in the second video. Anyway, this was my first taste of the Templar line. I'd spent a day already wandering around trying to find it, and I realized I was basically just retreading old territory and wasn't making any real progress. I found another mill line passing through St. Joseph's in Lukov, but this again wasn't the Templar line, and I was beginning to feel kind of weird. I even called my daughter and told her I was coming home because I was just feeling lonely. But I wound up going to Kashava and finding Mokosh again, and this time I found something weird again.
Here we go again. What's all this about?
This is very reminiscent of the kind of designs we've found on the Mokosh line in multiple locations, including Vasetin. And there's a whole video about that where, in fact, Tina Kemp actually interpreted the rune signs left in sticks and stones around the base of trees. So something quite strange is going on in this region on the Templar line, and in particular the female Mokosh line, as you will see.
So this little semicircle of stones and woods and things, sticks, like we've found many places around recently, is marking the beginning of the Mokosh line. Sorry, I'm out of breath, I just climbed a big hill. It's beginning to puzzle me. This is very fresh. You can tell that this is fresh. This has been made in the last couple of days, if not this morning. So who's doing this? Why? What's the purpose? And why am I coming across them all the time?
As I said, this looked fairly recent. You can see the mud in this sort of gateway in the stones. You can see that someone's cleared away the leaves and the mud, and so this looked as if it'd been made maybe even the same day that I came across it, or the day before, and it was designed with some intricacy, and I couldn't quite figure out what its purpose was, of course, but nonetheless it was very interesting to find it.
This is also on the Mokosh line, and at first I was thinking, what on earth is this? What's going on here? And then I realised it's a charcoal plant. They're actually making charcoal here, look.
I'd never seen a place where they made charcoal before, so I was quite fascinated by this place. The air was heavy with a stench of charcoal and burned wood, and there was lots of evidence as to what was going on in terms of piles of wood and then these massive ovens, 5 or 6 of them in a row. Quite intriguing. I enjoyed looking around this place. And again, this was on the Mokosh line.
Cool. Never seen a charcoal place before. That's very cool.
As I said, for some reason I was feeling lonely, and hiking and dowsing alone just wasn't as much fun as it usually is. So I decided to go to Rusava and book into the hotel there and spend the night. And I met a party of English school teachers, had a great evening, and it cheered me up no end. And then I realised that basically I was just covering old ground, and it was time for me to move on. It was time for me to move on into new territory and chase this line to the border.
It's kind of weird, I keep coming across these things. I really can't make head nor tail of it. I wish I understood what they were. If any of you out there know, give me a shout, would you? Thanks.
Despite the despondency, the usual synchronicities seem to occur, as I found when I got back to the van. Sorry about the wind noise.
So, you walk 5 kilometres up and down hills, and you find the line you were looking for. Well, you parked the van in the beginning, but didn't have your stick out, so you didn't know. Isn't that typical? I'm now stood in Poland. This becomes a sort of endless, fulfilling prophecy of finding yourself in the lines and finding stone circles and goodness knows what. It's all getting rather weird. Right on the beginning of a female line, just outside Trnava. Typical, really.
This statue reminds me of Hostin, and in fact Hostin isn't that far away, showing baby Perun firing lightning at the ground in the arms of Mokosh. Anyway, so my first couple of days had been spent really recovering this old ground and adding some points and sorting some things out. There are a lot of other lines in this area, as there always is along the Templar alignment, and that needs to get sorted out at some point. But on this trip, I realised and reaffirmed that my sole purpose was to track the Templar to the border with the Slovak Republic. And so I resolved to do that. And the next day, after a refreshing night of sleep, I got up and I drove the van back to Vsetín and started again, moving towards the Slovak border, following just the Templar line and not bothering with many of the other lines. But what also happened was the synchronicities and the mysteries broadened and deepened. If you want to find out what happens next, do please subscribe. Part 2 and probably part 3 will be out in the next couple of 3 weeks. And I just want to give you a preview at the end of this video as to the next thing that I found. Really, really quite bizarre. Take a look.
What on earth is this?